from Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine in Cleveland, Ohio. This is the All Access Med School Admissions Podcast. Hello again, everybody. I'm your host, Christian Essman, and I'm the Senior Director of Admissions and Financial Aid here at the medical school. And I got an extra special episode for you with my friend and Dean of Admissions, Dr. Lina Mehta. We were hanging out at work, and we said, we need to do another podcast, like just, you and I talking and catching up on some stuff. She has a position with the AAMC as the chairperson of the Committee on Admissions. And so she also works with 4 other regional chairs around the country. So she has a national view on some topics. So we jotted down a quick little outline. I grabbed my handy H4n Zoom recorder. That's why it sounds a little different. Set it up in her office and just hit record and went at it. So covered a lot of ground in this one with all kinds of topics, reflections on the application cycle that we just completed and looking ahead to the next cycle and some tips for you guys. So I put some resources in the show description for some of the things that we talked about, like links. We talk about a few fairs coming up and about the Supreme Court case that's in front of them right now regarding Harvard and UNC admissions. So check out those resources. We also mentioned if your pre-med group would like us to talk with your group sometime, there's information in there on how you get a hold of us and see if we can get something on the books for you. So there you go. Hope you enjoy it. And we had a fun one putting this one together. So let's just get right at it with Dr. Lina Mehta and myself in the office at the Health Education Campus, and enjoy. Okay, so we're here to catch people up on what's going on in admissions, so let's get right after it.
There's some stuff going on.
So why don't you have a view from the top, from the national level. Why don't you explain for listeners like what that is and what you're doing for the AAMC?
Okay. I'm the chair of the Committee on Admissions, which is an advisory group to the AAMC, the Association of American Medical Colleges, where we work with the AAMC to understand what salient issues are as pertains to admissions. We help to brainstorm what new policies might look like. We really just work in an advisory capacity to talk about all things admission. So I chair the committee. I have 4 regional reps from each of the 4 regions in the U.S. We have a representative from the Committee on Student Diversity. We have a student rep. We have a rep from the Group on Student Affairs National Steering Committee. And we actually have a pre-med advisor who sits on the committee with us. So really representatives from all constituent levels.
So you guys are kind of in the know on some things early before we get like what trickles down the admissions community. So the big one has been, we just had a webinar that you moderated last week with the attorney from the AAMC on the Supreme Court decision regarding Harvard and UNC admissions practices. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, the SCOTUS decision?
Yeah, I will. I can talk about that upcoming decision.
Just high level.
Yeah, so Supreme Court of the United States is hearing 2 cases which have been filed against Harvard and UNC, University of North Carolina, basically talking about their use of race-based admissions being discriminatory and potentially penalizing other groups. So this has gone all the way to the Supreme Court. There are 2 different cases looking at similar things, but again, 2 different cases. SCOTUS is going to hear their cases sometime late spring, early summer, and will make a ruling that could have pretty significant ramifications depending on what the ruling winds up being.
And so a ruling could be, if it's the worst case scenario, they would say that you're not allowed to use, admissions is not allowed to use race or ethnicity in the admissions process. Like we would have to be race blind.
Yes,
yeah.
That is a bad outcome. The worst outcome would be, though, if it transcends admissions and applies to financial aid or diversity, equity, and inclusion work at other levels as well. So that, to me, would be the worst case scenario if it goes even past admissions.
Yeah.
If it impacts admissions, yes, it would potentially, depending on the ruling, it could make it illegal to use race or ethnicity in any admissions decision-making processes. There are already 9 states in the United States who cannot consider those already in their decision-making processes. So I guess at a more granular level, it's already in play in some places, but I think the ramifications would be pretty far-reaching if this became federal law.
Mm-hmm. What we were saying that, like, it sounds like that data may be collected at the time of application, like it through AMCAS. So you might still collect somebody's race and ethnicity, but it wouldn't be visible to admissions. Like we'd have to like change our platforms to not be able to see that data, right?
So this is all conjecture. We don't know yet. Right. I just want to say that this whole topic is contextualized within conjecture. So the data would be available behind the scenes. Yes, we would not be able to use it in any decision making. But even if this decision does bar us from using race or ethnicity, it doesn't mean that we don't value, honor, and need diversity. So the data still needs to be there, still needs to be collectible, but we aren't able to use it in our day-to-day decision-making or even month-to-month. We can't use it in decision-making at all, but we need to know how we're doing. We can track progress and look at what our outcomes are.
Yeah, so more to come on that, but that's been the hot topic in admissions nationally.
It has been. It hasn't.
Closer and closer we get to a decision.
Yeah, it's going to be a big one. It could have really, again, as I said, pretty significant reverberations. So we'll have to wait and see how things go. I thought that Heather, the attorney, said maybe end of June. Yeah, she thought maybe end of June.
End of June we'd hear something. So more to come on that. Okay, the other hot topic is ChatGPT.
Ooh,
we were just talking about this with some of our current students today. So ChatGPT and essay writing.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
It's a thing. It goes on both sides. I read an article the other day about a school writing a communication to students using ChatGPT, and there was quite a backlash. Instead of a human taking the time to write about a sensitive topic, it was a school.
No way.
They utilized.
Oh, gosh.
And it said at the bottom, generated by ChatGPT bot.
Oh, my gosh.
So it's going to go both ways. I think there's a lot to be said for AI. I think that as a practicing physician, it can really potentially enrich the standardization of what we do. But with any new technology, we weren't really prepared. I mean, it was kind of just unleashed on the world, and nobody really knows what to do with it. So I'm pretty confident people are gonna use it in essay writing this year. But I mean, you and I talked about this, that we know there are applicants who have the means to hire consultants who basically write their essays for them. So maybe in a way, this is actually leveling the playing field. But, communication is really important in the practice of medicine. I firmly believe that some of the most effective physicians are the best communicators. And if we're unable to really assess what somebody's ability is to express themselves in the written word, that gives me a little bit of pause, I have to say. So I would say that we know applicants are going to use it, but please be judicious and understand that if you present a really shiny, perfectly written essay and you get to medical school and you get into a curriculum like ours, which is essay-based, and you can't write, it's going to be some problems. So I would say to use it judiciously if you use it.
It's pretty high risk, though, too, to want to use an AI machine to write your essays about. And a lot of them, not just ours, but require reflection and tell stories about you and your personal, like things that have happened in your life. And then for you to not want to take the time to do that soul-searching self-reflection for these essays that you're using to apply to med school, I think can be a little risky.
I think it can be risky in that those seemingly difficult hoops that one has to jump through are what help prepare you for the interview day, or what help prepare you and make you cognizant and aware of why you're really doing this, and is this really long, expensive, and arduous path one that you actually want to embark upon. So I think the risk is more downstream than just the immediate effect of those essays.
Yeah, and to be perfectly honest, I've created an account and I've thrown in all kinds of essay-based questions in it, and the stuff it returns is impressive. Impressive that a computer wrote them, quote unquote, but they're not like what we've read. I don't feel like the
human emotion doesn't come
from
through.
Real applicants. So, but just know that we've been playing around with it too, but it doesn't. It doesn't have the feels.
No, at least not yet, until it gets better.
Yeah. But we know it's there.
We know it's there, and we can't fight progress.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to understand why we ask for these essays, and not only does it serve us on the admission side, but in a way, it really serves the applicants as well to have to go through those reflective exercises.
Yeah, no, and that's a lot of what the application is. When I'm interviewing candidates, we comment that the whole application process really requires a lot of self-reflection as you look back at all of these things that you've done and experienced, and now you're putting it into writing for your application. Like, it really is an exercise in self-reflection, and so to use maybe an AI tool seems like kind of cheating the process, that self-reflection process, and learning about yourself a little bit and finding what you've come to value.
I agree, and I think that we start to really get to the fundamentals of professional identity formation, in that you are committing to a field that requires the highest levels of professionalism, ethics, and reflection. And so if you cheap it out with a ChatGPT essay that doesn't really mean much to you, it's sort of a violation, I think, of this unspoken code that we hold, spoken and unspoken code that we hold ourselves to.
Yeah. Okay, the other thing for accepted students, the Choose Your Medical School tools just became available last week. And so, in a nutshell, what that means is accepted students now have the ability to click plan to enroll potentially at a school that they're accepted to. And then on the 17th, because it's a Monday, April 17th.
First business day after the 15th.
Yep, they're able to, if they have more than 3 acceptances, they have to whittle it down to just 3. And then on May 1st is the decision down to 1. And that's when Commit to Enroll becomes available. Why do we know this so inside and out?
Why do we know this so well? Why, Christian? Why? Well, I got to co-chair the working group on medical school tools and admissions. How many years ago? 4 years ago?
Yeah,
4 years ago, where everything kind of deconstructed and reconstructed. And so I was one of the architects of this new Choose Your Medical School.
You and Doug
paradigm. Doug Taylor from Quiller in Eastern Tennessee, Quiller in School of Medicine. Yep, he's my good buddy.
I remember this. You were scratching stuff out on. We were in the old building, scratching stuff out on paper, like little workflows. And what about this? What's called?
What about this?
What if you called it that? What if you called it commit to enroll? Yeah, commit to enroll or something like that.
I am one of those unfortunate people who brainstorms in her sleep. We can talk about the pathology of that later. But I actually kept a notepad on my nightstand, and I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I came up with PTE and CTE in the middle of the night. I scribbled it down.
Oh my gosh!
So yeah, we can talk about that pathology later. But it served me well in this regard, I guess.
So accepted students will have already received official communications from AMCAS about these steps. And they wouldn't be shocking if the medical schools to which they're accepted are also sending how they process things and Choose Your Medical School tools.
I mean, not only would it be shocking, but it should actually occur. Yeah. It's really communication. The COIMS tools are really a communication between the school and the applicant. And so hopefully schools are educating applicants on what their internal policies and requirements are.
And just for transparency, what applicants should know is that we can't see on our end anything until May.
Right.
So up until then, all the data that we see is an aggregate. We can see like X number of students in your accepted cohort have 10 plus acceptances. X number of students in your cohort have 8 acceptances. So it's really
aggregate.
Yeah. We don't see any. So when a student whittles it down to 3, we don't know.
See. Yeah.
If they're still holding an acceptance with us, I guess we know they're in at least their 3.
Right. I view the 3 whittling it down as, we sort of alluded to this earlier, of reflection and the exercise for the student of not being caught on May 1 with, oh my gosh, I still have 6 schools and I don't know what I'm going to do. It's start to be intentional about how you're whittling your numbers down if you're lucky enough to have, not lucky enough, you just happen to have more than 3.
And back in the pre-Choose Your Med School days, when we were able to see the joint acceptance report, there would be students that had
17 acceptances.
And they would hang on to them
till the very last second.
Bitter end.
Yeah.
And you would see every day we could check and get a new report, and there would be, he's still holding on to 17 acceptances?
Yeah.
Like, come on.
I mean, the 17 were the exception, not the rule.
Yeah, but there would still be people that had multiples hanging on to the very bitter end, and that created an issue for med schools because we couldn't move on any of our alternate lists.
It was a bottleneck for a lot of things.
Yeah, so this really hopefully allows med schools to also get to our alternate list earlier if we're seeing some attrition and
right. That's another sort of byproduct of the CYMS tools is it hopefully forces people to make decisions in a way in which they still have agency, but also can hopefully move the bottleneck and get things moving faster.
Mm-hmm. The other thing we've been hearing, it was about a week and a half ago, somebody, a dean, put on the GSR admissions listserv, who's doing interviews next year, who's doing virtual, who's doing in person, and it was fast and furious. Everybody was replying what they were doing, and it seems to me that the majority of schools next year will be virtual again. Yeah,
that's true. And we did a survey, AAMC and COA and the AMCAS Advisory Committee sent out a survey which indicate that the majority of schools will be doing virtual. A few will be doing live. A few will be doing hybrid, where they give an applicant the opportunity to either come and interview in person or to interview virtually. But the lion's share are virtual.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels, most people that we talk to regularly, everybody's staying virtual and for the reasons that we've talked about before, that it's financially much easier for applicants. And for us, it's convenience and financially, advantageous for us.
Even operationally. You've said this. In the old days, pre-pandemic, our faculty, we have 4 huge hospital systems. Our faculty would have to get in their car and drive across town and find somewhere to park and come and do the interview and then go back to their car and drive back to the hospital and find somewhere to park. So easily adding an hour on to the already existent 45 minute to 1 hour interview. So even our faculty, we've been able to, I think, really get faculty more engaged by not having to drive across town.
Yep.
So on many levels.
I felt like this year we haven't seen in the last couple of years. We used to see kind of a tail off. Like their interest would wane as we got into December and January. People were like, they're getting tired, and then they're tired of doing that circus of getting here and interviewing, heading back, but now it's just convenient. So I think we'd have a hard time selling to them like, hey, we're going back in person.
I agree, but I don't think we need to. Yeah. I think that I feel really confident and comfortable with the virtual interview process.
Yeah. Zoom interviews work.
I think they work. I think that we've all gotten to a point where we're able to represent ourselves pretty well virtually. Mm-hmm. And the cost savings is big. Say somebody gets 8 interviews. I don't want you to have to drive or fly and take time off from work and lose your luggage and all of the difficulties. And plus airfare is so stinking expensive right now.
Just through the roof.
So get your 8 interviews, whatever, get into your 2, 3, 4, 5 schools, and then go visit after you've winnowed it down to some degree.
Yeah. Yeah, because now a lot of schools they're offering these in-person
second looks.
Yeah. So
second looks are back.
Yeah, a lot of people are going back to second look weekends, which are like 2.5, 3 days of on-campus, on-site
programming.
Yeah, programming and
touring.
Taking people out to the downtown city or wherever they are and stuff. And we used to do that. And then last year we switched to doing multiple open houses. And
which I love.
Yeah, because we invite not only the accepted student, but also their
partners, friends, family
members. Yeah.
I mean, with Second Link Weekend, remember we would have a waiting list because
we could only
accommodate X number of students, and they would come by themselves, and it was fun. We had a great time. But with the open houses, you come, you get to spend more time in Cleveland. You bring people who are important to you, but it's very rarely do we make a decision in a vacuum. So, I mean, you and I both went through the college admissions processes recently, and it was really important for me to see where my daughter was going to be. I understand grad school is different than undergrad, but I loved meeting the deans. I loved meeting our professors and faculty, and just understanding what the environment was going to be like and what she was going to be.
Yeah. And so we both talked to a lot of parents. We just had our first one a couple weeks ago, and it's so nice to get to talk to the parents too that come, or the partners too, because they're in on it too. And it's just as important to them. And as you said, like a parent, even though it's grad school or professional school, there is something. Many people are coming from out of state. They've never been to Cleveland before. They've never been to Ohio before, and so they get to come and see that too, and look around and go, okay,
and meet current students and meet deans and faculty and get the vibe for what the learning environment may feel like.
Yep. So it seems that a lot of med schools will keep doing virtual, but then there are a lot of opportunities then to do the
live
in
visits
person after you've been accepted.
When you're narrowing down your choices more fully.
Yep. Okay, the last one of the current hot topics. A lot of med schools have been pulling out of U.S. News and World Report rankings. So what have you heard from there?
A lot of schools, not a lot, but very pivotal, high-profile schools have pulled out of U.S. News with the discussion that the things that are being measured aren't necessarily an indicator of, quote-unquote, the best and the brightest in medicine, that potentially the wrong metrics are being weighed really heavily. And I agree with that. I think that the definition of the best and the brightest in a field such as medicine is very broadly based. Is it an MCAT score? Is it a GPA? Is it a background where you bring incredible cultural humility and a lens on the socioeconomic determinants of health in a way that other students have not experienced? Is it somebody who's overcome incredible personal challenge and has unbelievable resilience and grit? If we look at outcomes in medicine, is a step 1 score, a step 2 score, I guess now, is the 99th percentile the best and the brightest, or is a future physician who can move the needle in healthcare outcomes in an underserved community the best and the brightest? They all are. So to have these very unilateral descriptors of quote-unquote ranking in the best and the brightest does a tremendous disservice to medicine with all of its diverse needs.
Yep. I think it's not a secret. Well, with the outside of admissions, it's probably not well known, but we were never crazy about, we're not crazy
admissions
about this.
People don't love it.
You know, when you got to fill out the surveys and you're like, I can't believe this is what.
I get tapped to fill out the survey. I receive an invitation every year, and I don't know.
Yeah.
I got to rank all these internal medicine residencies across the country. I don't know who they are. We used to joke all the time that if you don't have a football team, your ranking's lower because no one's ever heard of you, and it's probably true.
Yeah.
Because just like I'm ranking these internal medicine programs, I don't know them all.
Yeah.
Why are you asking me to do this?
It was crazy. So what we would always say, they're going to be around until some of the higher ranked schools start pulling out, and it was like Harvard and Yale and Duke and Washington. They started getting it going.
Dominoes started falling.
So at our school, the dean said that they're going to look at this for the next year and maybe try to partner with U.S. News to come up with a different
what good measurements really would be.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard when you are a consumer, i.e. a pre-med student. How do you know? You don't know. It's like I go to buy a washing machine. I got to look on Consumer Reports because I don't know. Not that med school's like a washing machine, but you get my drift.
Yeah.
So I do think that somehow there needs to be some type of more standardizing, I guess, metrics or definitions maybe. But GPA, MCAT aren't really it.
Yeah.
They're not it. So yeah, we're hoping to have dialogue with the U.S. News people about what potentially a better system could look like.
Yeah. All right, switching gears. We just wrapped up the application cycle We wrapped it up. Gosh, it's almost been a month.
I know. We got it done early, a little early.
So looking back, what are some of our reflections on the last cycle? Well, one, nationally, applications were down 5%. And our applications at Case were up 2%. So we saw a little bump. But that's the ebb and flow, I think, of admissions that we've nationally. Yeah.
That's the largest. So prior to the pandemic, it was kind of +1, -1. It was a really narrow margin of variance. And then, as some of our listeners may know, that the year after the pandemic, there was a enormous jump in the number of applications to medical school. I think it was 17%, 17 or 18%.
Yeah.
So an astronomical jump. That's huge. Again, we don't really know what to attribute it to. People talked about the Fauci effect, or maybe everybody had more free time to fill out their applications. The number of non-traditional students didn't really increase, so we're still not really sure what led to that. But it was such an artificial overcorrection that, of course, we've seen a larger diminutions than in the subsequent years.
Yeah, I know some of our friends, they all saw, all of our applications most of them, except maybe one school, went down.
In the year after.
Yeah, the year after. Kind of down to more quote unquote normal.
Pre-pandemic.
Pre-pandemic levels that we were used to seeing. So, we actually interviewed fewer applicants this year.
We did.
For the university program. That was intentional. Yeah.
Jinx.
But no, we wanted to let's bring it down.
Let's use our wait list. Let's make sure we're using our wait list fully.
So what were some of the things that we saw in applications this year, some of the trends?
I feel like we saw more students potentially overestimating their participation in research, in service, and in other student groups than maybe in years past.
You mean by hours?
Hours. Yeah. We have one admissions committee member who really pays attention to that, and she crunched the numbers on somebody who had reported, I think, research, and that person would have been working 60 or 70 hours a week.
Yeah.
Nonstop.
Yep.
For the past 3 years in order for that math to have worked out, which clearly they had not been doing. So, it's you probably just kind of want to ballpark what you're doing, but I would say do the reverse math and make sure that it makes sense.
Yeah. And it's not just our one member that we have. It's
everywhere.
I've heard that from
Everyone's been talking
people
about
are
it.
People are like, gosh, when you do the math on that, it's impossible for you to be in school and doing some of the things you say you're doing. So I guess for the next round of applicants, make sure that you're not inflating or exaggerating, or really take the time to kind of ballpark as best you can that your hours add up, or the hours seem realistic in what they're doing. So we saw I think we're seeing a lot more scribing.
A lot of scribing, new cottage industry.
Yeah.
I happen to think it's an amazing experience for people who are considering medicine. You see all aspects of it, the grueling paperwork, the incredible number of patients you have to get through every hour, the medical terminology, you get to hear the stories. I think it's an incredible experience. Some schools don't really, maybe from what we've heard from some of our friends, don't really think scribing counts as medically related experience. I personally think it's an amazing and incredible one. You get to see how teams work. You're getting paid, and you're seeing how the team functions. You're really immersed in the medical settings. I think it's great.
Yeah, so we've seen that increase. I was thinking when we were putting together a little outline here for our conversation, the stuff that we've seen in the past, the trends, we first started 17, 18 years ago.
Here for a long time.
It was when somebody had research, and when an applicant had, it was kind of
they have some research.
They have research, right. And now
everybody got research.
As undergraduate universities have expanded opportunities for students, undergrads to get research experience, that's become more common. And then we would see a lot of Habitat for Humanity when that was kind of new, and then Doctors Without Borders for the longest time.
Not doing it, but talking about how you want to do it.
The personal statements like that. I want to be Doctors Without Borders.
We did see that a lot.
Yeah, we saw that a lot, and now we're seeing. There was study abroad when people were oh wow, now so many universities have
it formalized.
And Oh, and blogs. Remember when blogs, like everybody had a blog.
Everybody, they'd link us to it.
Everybody,
Yeah.
you could go check out their blog.
Yeah.
Whether it was about food or about like just their musings of whatever, like everybody had a blog. And now I feel like in the last couple of years we've got a lot of YouTubers.
Yep.
Everybody's like see a lot of YouTubers, Etsy shop owners, like people like big social media accounts like Instagram kind of people, and then these podcast people.
These podcast people.
Podcasters.
Dime a dozen, Christian.
Everybody's got a podcast.
Everybody's got a podcast.
Yeah, so. Oh, so those are some of the funny the Etsy shop ones are kind of are cool when they tell us like on interview days what they.
I love the things that everybody's doing, and it is very much tied to sort of the cultural zeitgeist, right, of what's going on at that time, which is really interesting. It's been very interesting to just evolve with the world.
And if you don't think we don't look. We look. We look. Because it's cool.
We actually read your applications and we think it's really cool.
It's interesting.
It's fun.
And I felt like, and the data supports this, but I felt like we've been seeing the last couple years students applying after graduation from undergrad, like taking gap year
or more.
The last 3 classes that at least that I can think of right now, the incoming classes, 75% of them were coming with a year or greater.
Yes. I think it's hard to, if you have the privilege of being able to take that year, I think it's hard to apply to medical school while you're in college. It's potentially, depending on your undergrad course sequence, by the time you get biochem in, it may be your junior year, and then you got to sit for your MCAT. And I think students are tired. I think that the burnout potential is there, and to group it all is hard.
Yep. All right. How about some tips for the next cycle? We talked about overestimating on hours on experiences, so really be mindful of that.
We've talked about using AI judiciously, if at all, in your essays.
Yep. What about any tips for letters of recommendation?
Meaning?
Well, who should they be picking? Who should applicants try to ask to be the recommenders?
People who know you. Try and establish a relationship with faculty, maybe at the end of the course or the interaction. Say, I may be applying to medical school one day. Can you keep me in the back of your head? And when you go to ask them for a letter of rec, maybe take a copy of your resume and maybe a personal statement, meet them for a coffee, give them a context. One thing that we've been alerted to is sometimes it seems recommenders have been asking applicants to write their own letters. Then they just sign it, which is rough. It puts the applicant in a very precarious and difficult position. It's hard to say no because you want that letter, but it's completely unethical. And the letter may or may not even be what we want.
Yeah.
So we're actually working with the National Association of Advisors in the Health Professions, NAHP, COA, and NAHP, to write some guidance for students on what to do if you're asked to write your own letter. Don't do it. It's not good. But ask the recommender, how can I help you? I'm not comfortable writing my own letter, but I know how busy you are. How can I help you? Yep. And that's maybe where the resume or giving them some reflections or meeting them for coffee and helping them understand the bigger picture would be helpful. But it puts the applicant in a really tough spot to be expected to do that. And
if you're early in your college career, go to office hours, go to office hours, go to office hours. Get to know them because they want to get to know you too.
They do. I mean, as an educator, sort of peripheral, myself, I want to know my students. I want to know the people I'm teaching. I care about them.
Yep. The other tip on essays that came to mind for me was applicants, be prepared. You're going to be writing a lot of essays. A lot of essays, especially when you get secondary applications. And that, I think, take your time writing those but if there are optional essays,
I would write them.
I'd write something,
stick with the prompt.
Yeah.
But the reason I think we put optional essays, and if it helps you round out your application.
Sometimes applicants ask us, like, how can I stand out? How can I, and that's a good question.
It's a good question. When you're tough process.
When you're in this pool, it's so deep. How do you stand out? And I often say, it's in your writing. Because the way you write about things is what makes it interesting and how it helps us get to know you. But if you get these optional essays, or like the ones that are not required, but like to say, like for instance, in our applications, like if there's anything else in here that haven't been captured, here's an opportunity to tell us something. We've had people write about like how they got interested in applying to us, like, and that's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So whether it's for Case
or something
Western,
important in their lives that haven't been able to articulate elsewhere. Now, I want to qualify and say we don't reject people if they don't do it. But if all things are equal, you might go with the one who wrote the optional essay and gave you yet more insight into themselves.
Yep.
One of the things that I also recommend for people in regards to essay writing is journal. When you're out having experiences in undergrad, out in medicine, outside of medicine, journal some of your thoughts and feelings so that when you go to write your essays, when you go to fill in the text fields in the work and experiences section, there's some authenticity and emotion in there too.
Yep. The other thing I wanted to mention too that's new for us for the next cycle is that we're, Case Western, are going to be implementing an MCAT cutoff.
Yeah.
For receiving our secondary application, and that cutoff score will be applicants have to have a 495 or greater to receive our secondary application, and that's something we've been talking about for the last couple of years. I know a few other schools do that similar practice too, and so just something to be aware of.
We looked at outcomes and we looked at our applicant pool, and we realized that people who score below 495 may not do as well in our curriculum. So we don't want to take your $95.
Yeah, for the secondary fee.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and that's updated in our MSAR and on our website and stuff. So it's there too. Okay. The other thing with some new AMCAS fields this year.
Yep.
They're adding, what was it, social justice and advocacy.
In the work and experiences section. We've been working on that for some time with COA. We had a subgroup chaired by Dr. Maurer, the Dean of Admissions at Michigan State. They did great work in getting this into the AMCAS application. So there's going to be detailed instructions in AMCAS for all of these changes. So for social justice and social justice related activities, maybe it's reproductive rights, or it's helping to decrease in some ways some of the health inequities. Maybe it's working with people who are housing insecure. Maybe it's helping patients navigate difficult medical situations where they don't have the agency to be able to advocate for themselves. So it can be pretty broadly based.
Yep. And again, this is something the applicant chooses how they want to classify it. So it's not a right or wrong.
Not right or wrong, but be reflective about why you chose that header.
And then they're changing the self-description for what used to be called the self-described disadvantage status. I don't remember what it's going to be called in AMCAS now.
It's other, but I should remember.
Yeah, that's okay. But in the past, students were able to self-describe if they had some type of disadvantage status growing up, and it was open. There wasn't any necessary parameters that had to be met to classify yourself as disadvantaged. So, but they changed the
and there's again lots of narrative kind of direction about what the prompt really means. Other changes are with in the old days we would just get institutional action or misdemeanor lumped, and now they're going to be separated into academic misconduct or a civil issue.
Or both behavior or. No,
conduct. Conduct or academic. Or both. And so now there'll be a drop down where you can indicate if you've had some transgression, you can indicate how it should be grouped.
Okay. And the last thing that I put on here was, or second to last thing, was like kind of where we're going, what we're doing this spring. And hopefully I get this out in time, but on Wednesday, March 1st, I'm going to be on a small panel with Dr. Christine Hay from Rochester School of Medicine in Rochester, New York. And it's with this group called Young Physicians Initiative, and there's some med students from Wake Forest who started this group. And so they invited...
What's the ethos of their group?
To get information out from med students to pre-meds. So it's free.
So out of the horse's mouth, a med student.
It's not just for people from Wake Forest. It just happens to be those students started it there.
That's great.
Yeah, so it's called Young Physicians Initiative. So it's March 1st. I think it's at 7:30, but we posted it on our socials. And let's see. And then it's something to get on the radar for pre-meds. The AAMC is having a virtual fair on the 28th and 29th of March. So it's 2 days. Mm-hmm. And day one is an afternoon of panels with admissions people on a bunch of different topics. I was flattered to be invited to be on the panel with a couple of admissions deans. It's called An Inside Look at How Admissions Committees Review Applications. So that's on the 28th. And then after that, after our panel, there's one on if you're reapplying, how, when, and why to reapply. There's a personal statement workshop. There's a couple others. So they're all
sounds like they're really good topics.
Yeah, and they're all admissions people on there. Right? And I think some students too.
And it's free for students to attend this virtual fair.
Yep, you just have to register, but it's free. And then, so that's day one. And then day two is it's like basically a virtual fair. So AAMC, they do this like twice a year, like once in the spring, one in the fall. And they use a pretty cool, pretty slick platform where then registrants or attendees can bounce around to pick different schools. So you pop into their virtual booth and then use a chat feature. And then it's usually admissions people and sometimes current med students at that school. We're representing that booth, and then you can chat them your questions, and you can jump into private messaging with people, and so it's a easy way to get a lot of information in a short amount of time
and visit a lot of schools.
Yeah, and see a lot of different schools. Yeah, so that's on March 28th and 29th.
And Tom, our assistant director of admissions, is going to staff that one.
Yep, he's going to be doing that along with our friends from the Cleveland Clinic program, and I think MSTP are going to be on there too.
Great.
Throughout the day. Tom's our assistant director. He's going to Oberlin March 7th. I'm going to University of Michigan March 8th. I'm working with Pitt and Carnegie Mellon to do something there in person. So some of our in-person things are really more regional.
They are, but we're happy to do Zoom events for students from schools across the country. Yep.
So if you're a pre-med club, would like to try to have us come and talk, we can talk about. We've got a lot of presentations we've created over the years.
And we're all pretty engaged in admissions, as you've probably students or applicants have just heard, or listeners have just heard, and they could meet the voice behind the podcast, Mr. Christian Esmond.
That stop. But no, like seriously, because I've offered this to other groups, and they've contacted me and said, "Yeah, can you come and talk?" And we could talk about case, or we could talk about how to write effectively for your applications or personal statements.
Yeah, I think as maybe your listeners have been able to ascertain that this podcast is there to help everybody. Mm-hmm. We'd love for you to be interested in case, but if we're not the right place for you, we just want to help people get into medical school.
But that said, Case is the place.
Yeah,
we did not plan that. We did not plan that. Oh my gosh, that's funny. Okay, last thing then. Just quick personal thing. What is there a personal, like, what are you reading right now? Any book recommendations?
I am reading, well, I don't know if this will resonate with our cohort who are at a different stage in life than mine, but I'm reading a book called Strengths to Strengths, which is how to sort of transition to Act 2 when you've gotten to a midpoint of your career and you're looking towards where you may want to go from there. How do you transition with agency? How do you even change your mindset and your perspective on yourself from going from this really busy, practitioner who's doing whatever to maybe slowing it down a little bit? And how do you give yourself permission to do that? So it's a really good book. It's bringing me all sorts of insights and all sorts of discoveries.
But you also read a lot of books for pleasure.
I do.
You read fast.
I read really fast.
Yeah.
I'm reading The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks right now. That's actually our next book club book.
Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks.
The HeLa cells. It was a black woman who had endometrial cancer, and her cells were harvested and used in multiple experiments through the decades without her or her family's permission.
My gosh.
And a lot of money was made on those cells. So it's really digging into the ethics of how we conduct medical experimentation and agency and informed consent and inequities in healthcare.
Let's see, a book I'm reading. Well, I've not told people this, at least on my podcast, but I'm gone to grad school.
Yes, Christian's in school.
I'm back in school.
He's back in school.
Got a new backpack and a lunchbox.
They don't know what a trapper keeper is.
Got a new lunchbox and new shoes. I'm going to grad school at the business school here at Case Weatherhead for a master's in organizational development. And so I read a lot of books, but there's one I read called Becoming a Resident Leader.
Oh, I read that.
Yeah, and
I got certified as a coach at the place where you were doing your master's degree, so it's been really fun to talk about.
I know, and we nerd out on that now.
We're total nerds in this, yes.
But that book, there's exercises at the end of each chapter, and if you go beyond just reading it and do the exercises, it makes you think a lot about who you are and what your value and what your passions are. And so I mentioned that because oftentimes applicants hear like, you have to be a leader, be a leader, and put leadership on your application. And I've said this so many times on this podcast, but like, you don't have to be the president or vice president of a student organization or a club to have leadership like on your application. And so I think even if you read the first 4 chapters, you can read and understand what being a leader is. A leader can be so many things in your classroom, in your community, in your neighborhood, picking up trash, walking down the sidewalk. You know what I mean?
And leadership evolves as you evolve. I went to a leadership development course that changed my life. So I think that you can intentionally learn how to lead. Yep. So there's that book. And then I had an applicant this year recommend for pleasure. I've told about this book so many times. I loved it so much. It was called Project Hail Mary. Yeah.
It was I've never read science fiction before. And the applicant said, that's what she's reading. And so I picked it up. It's by Andy Weir. He wrote Martian. That was a movie that had Matthew Damon in it. Dr. Maida doesn't watch movies.
I'm illiterate to pop culture.
She's a little bit more of a reader.
Yes.
And it was one of the best books I've read. It was so imaginative.
I have to read it. I haven't gotten it yet.
I don't know if you'd like it, but
I'll try it.
Yeah, but it was such a creative story. It's like, I can't believe it's just great when people come up with these stories.
Creativity.
It was just amazing. So I thought it was just a really fun book to read. So anyway.
Gotta live your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or everyone on this podcast, if you're heading towards medicine, you're heading towards a very demanding, sometimes overwhelming and all-encompassing professional choice, but you got to live your life. So read the books.
Yep.
Do the things. Have fun.
Find your passions.
Yep.
Have a balance.
Yep.
Have a balance. So, all right. It's been fun catching up.
Likewise. I'll see you across the cubicle.
I'll see you across the cubicle.
Okay.
All right.
See ya.